Hi everyone, this is Denise Saladay. Welcome to Feature Supportability Training for Clarity 16.2.2. And we'll be taking a look at the topic of timesheet improvements. Based on a lot of input from customers, we've made some improvements to the usability in the timesheet area. We've modified how you would select time periods whenever you're populating timesheets and reviewing them. We've changed the formatting of the project and task details and the status of the timesheet and the time periods. We've also added the capability to view, add, modify, and delete time entry notes in the Global Notes panel. We've improved the capability for searching while you're adding tasks within timesheets. And we've also added 2 hyperlinks to time to improve the navigation. We've also made some improvements to the accessibility for timesheets. First, all of the modifications that we made this release are also accessible. For the keyboard user, we've provided better Notes panel navigation, and we've included the approval and rejection of timesheets. And last, we've made some improvements in the screen reader announcements. Next, I'll walk through the usability improvements that we made in timesheets, and then after that, we'll take a look at the accessibility improvements for the keyboard user. First, we'll take a look at the changes that were made to the time period selection. Under the prior release, you can see that we had a carousel, and the only way to really navigate to different time periods was through the scrolling. So in this release, while you can still do that with the arrows, we added this new date picker. And in here, you could choose any date you want, and you can even easily go to a different year by navigating as follows. This way you don't have to scroll through all the periods to find what you're looking for. And also note that we're displaying the time period year now as well. We made the same change in the review and approve area. You can see this is the old release where we had the carousel, and under the new release you have the date picker. And whatever time period that the user selects will persist during their current browser session, but whenever they log out and back in again, it will reset to the current time period. We also made a change to how we're displaying the time period and timesheet status. In the old release, you can see that we had open here, which relates to the time period. So last release, it looks like it's the time period that this is related to, but it's actually the timesheet status. So what we did is in the current release, for the timesheet status, we moved the status outside of the period control so that you can easily tell that this open refers to the timesheet and not the time period status. And on the review and approve screen, last release, you can see that this open here refers to the time period and not the timesheet. This is timesheet for Tom Morris is actually in submitted status. And the change that we made here, this release, is that because it refers to the time period, we moved the status into the time period control. So you can easily tell what it refers to. And because of this change in treatment with the status, it should be more obvious now to users whether the status is actually referring to the time period status or the timesheet status. Another change we made is what is displayed in the Global Notes panel. In the last release, you can see there's one note here for this timesheet, and it only shows timesheet notes. This release, you can see there's two notes here for the same timesheet, and when you click on the Notes button, you will see not only timesheet notes, but time entry notes. Additionally, whenever you're adding notes in the Notes panel, you'll now have a new button for Save and Cancel for the notes. You also have that same capability in Review and Approve. So you can see that Tom Morris's timesheet has one note, and in the Notes panel for last release, you can only see timesheet notes. In this release, under the Review and Approve, in the Notes panel, you can see we have two notes, and now instead of just showing just timesheet notes, we're also displaying time entry notes. We also made a small change to how time entry notes are accessed in My Timesheet. So on the prior release, you could click on this notes icon here to see any time entry notes for this item, or you could click here and you would see them. This release, we've changed the notes icon to be a little more apparent, and you can still access your time entry note by clicking on the icon. But we've also given you the capability in the three-dot menu that you can open up notes for the time entry that you're looking at here through that action. And if you're creating a new note, you'll see that you also have the new Save and Cancel button. You've probably also noticed that we made some formatting changes to the project and task presentation. Before, you can see that the task was bold and the project here was indented. So instead, what we've decided to do is we've made the project bold and we've indented the task. We also made the column here a little bit bigger too, and we think this will definitely be more usable. We've also enhanced the search capabilities whenever you're adding tasks. So in the selection grid here, the search would only operate on the task name and the task ID. And now we're actually searching across investment name and investment ID as well as tasks. In My Timesheet, tasks will now have a link to the task properties. Task properties will have to be enabled in the blueprint, but if it's not enabled in the blueprint, the user instead will be navigated to the tasks grid. And last, I want to cover a couple of changes that we made in the timesheets grid this release. If you have a timesheet that's in submitted status, like these ones are, you will now have a link here that'll navigate you to the resource time detail modal. But again, this is only for timesheets in submitted status. Users will now have the vendor attribute, which is from the resource properties, available in their grid. So they could add columns in the grid or add filters based on that new attribute. There have been a number of changes made to accessibility, and first we'll just take a look at some of the shortcomings that existed last release. So last release, the keyboard user would have to tab to everything, and there wasn't any support in the project task area for any arrows in the table here for time details. You had to tab to every single field. And if you go to the notes area, as soon as you entered the notes panel, you could tab inside of the notes panel, but as soon as you got to the end of it, you would lose focus here. And the only way for you to get to the columns panel over here, and let's do that now, is you had to navigate through the entire timesheet table. You can see here that it removed task. This is the focus. We're moving down and the focus is throughout the table. You can see that I have to go through all the fields in this table here. They're treated as separate fields, and now I have access to the columns panel. So let's take a look now at the improvements that are here this release. First, all of the improvements that we made for usability, we also made accessible. So you can actually enter this column picker here for a date picker and pick your date, and you can navigate back to close it. You can also navigate to the notes panel. We made some improvements there, like you could before, but the improvements are while you're in the notes panel, you're not going to lose focus. And if you have a new note here, you can see that you can actually save it, and the buttons, the new save and cancel buttons, are accessible as well. And as soon as you enter a new note, you're brought back into another input control here where you can actually enter another note. So that's definitely an improvement as well. Now if we navigate through the notes panel, when we get to the end of it, you can see that instead of losing focus like we did last release, now the focus is up on the X where users can close the notes panel. So next, let's look at some of the improvements that were made in the table itself for the keyboard user. So you can see here that this whole table here is treated more like a table instead of separate rows. So if I was to tab from here, this is the beginning of the detail table, and if I do another tab, I'm brought into the column panel. Instead of having to navigate through the whole table field by field to get to the end of it, I'm brought here. So now if I navigate back here, you can see that I can use my down arrow keys to access the task. And before, there was no support for any arrow keys within this table here, but now we can use the down arrow, we can use the up and down arrows and go in any direction that we want. We can easily navigate to any place that we want to within this table. And if we wanted to, as a secondary capability, tabs also available in edit mode where you can edit a single line in this table. So this task and investment area was changed to a row group, and the screen reader will now announce it as a group row, and the screen reader will also announce the message and the cancel and submit buttons that we've added. Furthermore, if we go to the column panel, Let me just navigate back to the column panel. Now we have up and down arrow key support within the column panel. As you can see, we can navigate to any field that we want. This wasn't in place last release. And the last big change that we made and this is on the timesheet grid for keyboard users, is now they can approve timesheets from this grid. And they'll do that by navigating to the resource name so that they can access this new link that we have today to the resource timesheet detail modal. And if you navigate through, you can see here that I could approve or reject this timesheet directly here. And additionally, the user could tab into the details flyout and navigate to the review tab here and review or approve or reject this timesheet from this location as well. And this concludes supportability training for timesheet improvements. Thank you.